expecting. It's going to be wonderful. We're really, really looking forward to you being. Great. I was just checking. We are live on YouTube as well. So if you have any friends that have missed the registration, I will put it online in the chat function. If you have any questions for Edo, please pop them in the Q&A box so we can distinguish between chat and questions. If you have any comments or you want to share comments, please welcome to put them in the chat function, we will have an offline chat in the chat function and have an engagement about what Edo is going to tell us today. So we are on the hour, and without any further ado, welcome to Edo. And I'm not going to give you any background to Edo because Edo is going to tell us all about his background and a personal story in terms of where he came from and how he got to be in this very, very interesting space. So I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Carolyn, for having me on this webinar. It's wonderful for me again to talk to the audience outside Holland. I love to do it because actually it's my personal mission to increase the impact and visibility of governance professionals worldwide. So thank you again, Carolyn, for giving me this opportunity, and hopefully I can inspire the people, the audience, with my story, which is called the enhancing role of the governance professional, and especially some methods I practiced as a corporate secretary. So enjoy, and please feel free to ask questions. But before I start my personal story or my vision, I shall give you a bit of a personal introduction. Then you know the context in which I tell you this story. It's good for you to know that I'm a sociologist. I look at organizations and companies as a sociologist and an economist. And nowadays I'm teaching at 2 universities. One is called Windesheim University in the place of Zwolle in Holland, and the other one, a specific university called Governance University. And this training course, which I'm telling you about, is also given offline at Governance University for corporate secretaries. Besides that, I'm an international speaker and a consultant on the topic I want to provide to you. And maybe most important, I'm a sports lover and a music lover. And here you can see me on the picture cycling up the Gardungla. It's the world's highest mountain peak in India. And last summer I did it again. And during my cycling trip, I did some lecturing for corporate secretaries and Indian directors. And they also liked my story, which I'm going to tell to you. Now, for the people who don't know who I am, my name is Edo de Vette. I'm from Holland, and you also can see this a little tiny country between England, Germany, and Belgium, famous for its wooden shoes, its cheese, its financial institutions. So that's who I am. Before we start, I have to give you a kind of a disclaimer, because I don't think I have any wisdom inside of me, which I can present to you. And if I have any wisdom, I don't want to provide any wisdom. Hopefully, I can let you think yourself by my stories, by the things I have examined, by the things I did as a corporate secretary. This hopefully I can make you think rather than giving you the absolute wisdom, because there is not an absolute wisdom in my opinion. But there are some things going on in governance land, or specifically in company land. There are some fundamental changes going on. Jan Rotmans is a big professor in Holland, and he called it, we don't live in an era of change, but in a change of era. And look outside, if it's climate change, economic change, Russia, Ukraine, so much instability, so much changes around our companies. And I think we have to be aware of those changes so we can see whether it affects also governance in our boardrooms and also governance in our profession. And I want to show you 3 changes which I saw 10 years ago when I was a corporate secretary. One of them, the technological developments. Here you can see an overview from centuries ago when there was an agricultural revolution, an industrial revolution, and it lasted for years and years, 1,000 years. But the technological developments became faster and faster. And look, for example, it lasted only 22 years from moon landing to internet. And internet is maybe the biggest invention of them all. And it lasted from internet to the demystified human DNA only for 9 years. And maybe we're going to see in the year of 2045, technology has rushed in, has crushed us, because it's called the point of singularity, and maybe we'll be taken over by technology. And there is, for example, an interesting website called Will Robots Take My Job? And if you search for the job of secretary, then you will see, and it's a big investigation, that there's a probability of almost 70% that parts of the job of the governance professional, of the corporate secretary, of the company secretary will be taken by robots in maybe 10 to 15 years. So that's an interesting technological development, will affect us, will affect the board, will affect governance, and will affect the roles we play in governance. On the other hand, we have to think about, we have value as governance professional for our board of directors, but maybe we have to think in other means of having value for our boards, because some parts are taken over by technology. And that's one development. The other one I see is we becoming a kind of an experience economy. Here you can see a picture of a sauna. I love to go to the sauna with my wife, and always the sauna was a kind of a quiet place. You came at peace, at rest. But nowadays, when we go also to the sauna, there's also sound, light, music. We have to be entertained even in a simple sauna. Yeah, suppose you go shopping, there are always these experiences to see whether we can affect the customer. It's an experience economy we're living in. The last one I want to tell you is the social developments. I come from Holland, and in a European perspectives, also in governance, there were some terrible things happening in the last couple of decades. It's fraud at the board, terrible decisions, terrible investments. So during the year 2011, there was a big investigation in Holland how all these things could happen by the board of directors and the executive directors or the non-executive directors. There was a big investigation, and some of the people of this team were saying, well, the company or the corporate secretary has a special role to play. Maybe it's time that the secretary or the governance professional has to be aware that he or she is the conscious of the board and the CEO, or the conscious of the company. And when you are telling me you're the conscious of the company, I will feel I will be hit by heart and not by head. So there are some developments, and there are even more developments, sustainability, but these for me were 3 dominant developments in the role I had to play as a governance professional. Here you can see me on the left picture. You can see me walking away from a job which I did for over 15 years. I was a corporate secretary at a really big real estate company in Holland. And it's my final day in the year 2016, somewhere around that. I've done it all. I did it all. It was a marvelous job, being in the wings of power, addressing and giving the board all the information they needed, so the company was in control. But on the other hand, there were also terrible things happening during those 15 years. As I mentioned before, there was a period, there was fraud at the board. There were very, very bad investments being made, over 100 millions of euros, bad investments, but also trouble at the board from time to time. And when I left my job, I decided to do something completely different. There was still a question in my mind, actually a quest on what happened over those 15 years and what was my role as a corporate secretary. And I shifted to an entirely completely new job, being a lecturer or a professor at the university. But still, there was this question in my mind. So I decided after 2 years, in the years 2018, to do a research among all the board members I worked with and do a kind of an interview with them addressing these kind of questions. What is good governance? What was your role you had to play in our company? What's the role of the corporate secretary? And I decided in the year 2018 to write a book about it. You can see it. It's called in Holland in Dutch, De Steen der Wijzen, the Philosopher's Stone. My personal search for the ingredients of good governance. And actually, it's a management novel. For 80%, it's based on the interviews I did with my board members. For 20%, it's fiction, because I wanted to make a good story to read, and I decided to make a management novel out of it. And this book became the basis of my thinking. What could be the new role of the governance professional? Which role do he has to play even more as a moral conscience of the company? But it started after these interviews with these two personal questions. Actually, big questions. What is good governance? What is it? And what was my role as a corporate secretary or as a governance professional? Which role did I play? And these are big questions. And if you ask people this big question, you get all kind of answers. So in the year 2018, I was sitting on my desk with all these interviews and I was thinking, well, what happened? They give me all kind of answers. And I showed and read the articles and the interviews, and I came being aware that there were actually two types of answers being given to these big questions. On one hand, people were telling me experiences of good governance. So they give their own experiences of good or bad governance. But on the other hand, people were not telling me experiences of good governance in their mind, but the memory to an experiences. And that is something completely difficult. Most of the time, we mix it all up. But Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman, who also did an extensive research on this type of questions, what's luck, what's happiness, taught us that we have to see people are on one hand answering from the experiencing self and on one hand from the remembering selves. And when I adapted his philosophy, I became aware that it was also true for my interviews. After I read my book, and after I have examined all those stories of those board companies, I wrote actually a vision, it's my vision, on the evolving role of governance and the evolving role of the governance professional. And here you can see it. I shall explain it a bit because it's actually the basis of the story I'm going to tell you. On one hand, you see that we play a role as governance professionals in the core governance processes, whether be it in compliance or whether it's preparing boardroom meetings, during or after boardroom meetings, in the decision-making processes. We have to play a dominant role in the governance processes. On one hand, you see it can be a side effect, a minimal effect, or you're being hardcore into these governance processes. On the other hand, I see that we have to create our own value for the board. On one hand, it can be operational value. And on the other hand, maybe we're up to being more tactical or giving more strategic value for the board. And when we put these two axes to each other, then you see, in my opinion, three dominant roles governance professionals can play inside or outside the boardroom. The one hand, very traditional, being the board assistant, being aware that you have to take care of your company, being in control, that the board can take all the necessary decisions they have to take and they have to make. It's a kind of an administrative role, being the board assistant. In Holland, when I'm doing this lecturing, I always say, this is the pizza bottom. The pizza bottom has to be right. You have to be in control and you have to take part to being in control. And in my company, I created much value for our board, for our company in doing this job, playing this role pretty good. But you can see it is a kind of an S-curve. Somewhere around the year 2014, 15, my board was asking me different kind of questions due to all the developments which were playing around our company. And I didn't have the clear answers. I had to see if I could be more open-minded, actually a bit more creative, to find new answers to existing problems. And that's the part where I became aware that next to being a board assistant, I had to be more and act more like being a board innovator, just solving and searching for new solution to existing problems. And by doing this new role, being a board innovator, next to being a board assistant, I created more extra value for my board. Not only the operational value, but a bit more like strategic value, a bit more like advisory. And now we're sitting in the era, I think 2021, 2022. I see that not only governance professionals has to be board innovators, but yeah, they are also this moral conscious of the company. So we have to reinvent our role again. And I think the next role we are going to play, it's called the showrunner of the board or the board producer. We have to see how we can create extra value, not only for my board or my company, but maybe for the society as a whole. And that's the new challenging role we have to play. So this is my governance development framework, which I found out by doing all these interviews in the context of a European company. It's also good to say Holland, European context, governance context. And as I told you before, when I had all those stories on my desk, I saw also in governance that my board members and my directors were telling me sometimes people experiences on good governance from their experiencing self. So here you can an example. Some directors were telling me, oh, Edo, well, when you're preparing a boardroom meeting, oh, there's always too much written content. Please, too much. I can't handle it. And some other people were telling me, oh, I remember the company and doing these boardroom meetings, but they lasted for maybe 4 to 5 hours, boring meetings. That's the answer when you are asking me, what is good governance or bad governance? Boring meetings. And some were telling me, Edo, you are always making these notes, but sometimes the notes came too late after a couple of weeks. So why didn't you start earlier by making the notes and sending them to me? These are all examples from the board of directors, from their experiencing self. And they're a bit negative, but there were also positive ones. But the interesting thing is that on the other hand, some board members, some directors were telling me another story. And I will tell you one story of an executive director, the CFO, who was telling me this story about the same question, what is good governance? He was telling me, Edo, I was always very busy and we had 8 board meetings during the year. And it was 5 o'clock in the evening and I had to go to this company, and then I parked my car next to our head office. Here you can see our head office. And I was busy and I was tired, but I had to do this board meeting. And then I stepped out of the car, walked into this beautiful building, and inside the building there was a wooden floor, marble on the wall, and he was walking down the basement. And he said, when I entered the building, I felt more and more relaxed. And when I walked into the basement, I saw a big table and people sitting on the table, and I smell ginger and garlic, because I remembered we're gonna have to eat first some Chinese food. And that's true, because I, as a corporate secretary, always had to look after Chinese food for the board of directors. And the CFO was telling me, yeah, and then I was standing in the queue waiting for my food. I took my food and sat on the table. And the only thing, I was listening to all the discussions at the table about life, about work. We're having fun. We ate dinner. And at 8 o'clock, the chairman was telling us, please, are we finished with our dinner? Let's stand up and go to our boardroom. And then they walked up to the first room, part of the building. Here you can see it. And they were entering a marvelous, marvelous boardroom. Everything was spelled out. The spoon, the cup of coffee, the papers. And the CFO was telling me on the question, what is good governance? When I entered this room, the magic was gone. So on one hand, I had answers to this question from the remembering self and the experiencing self. So the last one, the CFO, didn't tell me something about the experience itself. He was telling me something about the circumstances in which governance took place. It was his remembering to a boardroom meeting. And that's interesting, because I was sitting on my desk with all those stories, and I was thinking, what are they trying to tell me, these stories? So there is an experiencing and there's a remembering to these experiences. And then I told you, I'm also an economist, a marketeer. I was thinking, well, this has to be found out already. And as I told you, Daniel Kahneman searches Van Anema about experiencing selves and the remembering to the experiences. And the one particular group of people who adopted this principle are the marketeers. So if you want to stay ahead of the curve, always look to the marketeers, because they adapted this kind of visions, philosophies. And why? Here you can see a customer journey. A customer journey in Dutch, but I'm going to explain the customer journey, because if there is an experience and there's a remembering to the experience, Daniel Kahneman tells us you can influence not only the experience, but also the remembrance to the experience. And the marketers adapted this principle. So they started by making customer journeys. They want to try affect us when we want to buy a bench by IKEA. You go to the IKEA, you go to the parking car, you enter the shop, and maybe you try to see what you want to buy, but there's a restaurant, etc., etc. It's all mapped out, this buying process. And this buying process in a commercial or marketing world is written down because people want to try to see whether they can influence your remembering to this buying process. So it's not about the actual stuff you're going to buy. And in IKEA, it's, for example, the restaurant, the parking place. There are positive touch points, you call it touch points, because they will influence your memory to this buying experience. And at the end, when I asked it to the Dutch listeners in IKEA, what do you remember about IKEA when you bought a bench or whatever? 99% of the people will remember IKEA, not about the bench or the stuff they bought. It's about the ice cream or the hot dog at the end after you paid. Because Daniel Kahneman also said, you have to take care. What are you doing? Always search for a peak end, a positive remember to the things you're doing. But this is not our context. This is marketing. But when I saw it worked in marketing, trying to influence not only experiences, but also remember to experiences, I saw, well, then it's simple. I have to adapt this principle and try to use it in my governance context. So this is what I did. I made governance journeys, and governance journeys because one of the main tasks I had to do as a governance professional was preparing boardroom meetings, during boardroom meetings and after boardroom meetings, or making the agenda during boardroom meetings and writing down the notes. Core processes every week. And I was trying to see, are there some negative or positive touch points which can affect the board of directors in a positive or a negative way? And I found them. And the concept is, if you can find a negative touch point, for example, the notes are always too late, then on one hand, from the experiencing self, you would say, okay, I'm trying to see whether I can make them faster. It's positive for the experience, but the remembering to the experience will also be positive. And the remembering is the best explanation for future behavior and future decisions, in this case, for the board of directors. So you can influence on both sides and create or add value for your board of directors. And here you can see how it can be done. Here you see a governance context in the middle, and I put a photo of a boardroom meeting where we had multiple boardroom meetings on one hand. You see a chair and a table, but you also can see lights. You can see me, it's tiny in the back. I'm sitting in the back writing down the notes directly on this big screen. You can see, not on this page, but there's also a DJ in the house. There's coffee to be, which you can get. And that's the governance context. It's about boardroom meetings, serious stuff, really, big decisions. But I try to see if I can redesign these traditional boardroom meetings by introducing positive touch points which can affect the decision-making process in a positive way. So the remembrance to this boardroom meeting will be positive. It will lead to a lasting memory, and even more by a transforming memory, that people after 2 years still will remember those boardroom meetings, and not only by the decision which being taken, but only by a good and positive memory to this boardroom meeting. And the experiences can be created by using what I did, light. I put blue light on financial topics because it's already known that blue light is the same like financial topics. If you want to address a creative topic, please put yellow light or orange light. It's also about introducing music. It's also about creating a nice environment. So you can create circumstances, senses. I used smell, for example, by introducing smell in a boardroom meeting because it affects our memory and our brain. And it will create memories, in this case, to boardroom meetings. So you can create experiences next to a traditional role. But then you have to be open-minded. That's actually one thing what I did. You can see it again. I did it with lights, music in a boardroom meeting. And it was fun to do. You can see smell, for example, apple pie. I really used apple pie for all in a boardroom meeting because my board of directors liked apple pie. And it's so simple. But if we didn't have any apple pie during boardroom meetings, the board of directors were complaining, where's the apple pie? So it seems simple, but you really can add value by thinking and designing boardroom meetings or whatever you're doing in governance, not only by experiences of good governance, but also create memories which will affect the experience in a positive way. On the left picture, you see smell. We also use smell to affect boardroom meetings, decision-making processes. And it maybe seems a bit odd, but I did it in my traditional role and it worked very well because my directors, after 2 to 3 years, were still remembering these boardroom meetings where they had to take serious decisions. So you can create experiences. Now, the last one, for example, what we did was also when we entered the boardroom meeting, they were always in a rush, these directors. We started by using a 1-minute meditation, at ease, slow down, and then they started the boardroom meeting just by using a 1-minute meditation. Yeah, somebody had to think about it. And that was the role, my new role as a corporate secretary. I became a kind of a board innovator. I added slightly things through traditional corporate processes. And on the other pictures, you can see our board of directors, the non-executive board of directors. We had to make big decisions. For example, investments in our community, about 100 million euros to build 1,000 houses. And of course, when they had to take this decision, there were those notes, there was a return on investment, financial perspectives, they're already there. But we were a social housing company. And I thought not only the financial perspective is dominant, but also, for example, the customer perspective. And what we did, and that was truly new, I asked my directors to go on a bicycle. Now everybody cycles in Holland. And before the boardroom meeting, they first went to the area where the buildings were built. They saw it on a map. They went inside to have some chats with some people. They got all the perspectives and then they went to the boardroom. So I added new perspectives on the financial ones, and it enriched the boardroom meeting. It enriched the discussion. I truly think they would take a better decision just by thinking, how can I add experiences? And it was fun to do. Because I had to be open-minded, I had to be creative, small parts, just think, oh, can it work? And it worked. And somewhere around the year 2018, when I did it in practice for a couple of years, I was thinking, yeah, what was my new role? On one hand, I'm a board assistant, but on the other hand, I'm a kind of creating magical moments. And is that all there is for me as a governance professional? But as I told you, it's somewhere around 2011 already that there were some serious bad mistakes, fraud at the board, and all, etc., was happening in our context of governance in Holland. And here you can see there was a big investigation going on because we want the politicians want to know what happened. And here you can see my chairman who is going to the community to stand before it and has to explain what happened all those years in my company, all those bad decisions and the role you had to play as a non-executive board. And he was a very mature chairman. He was also a ministry in Holland. But when the chairman of the committee asked him the simple question, please, chairman, with all your knowledge, give me an answer to the question, what is actually good governance and what is the role you have to play as a board? My chairman was telling me, if you want an answer, if you are searching for the philosopher's stone, I owe you the answer. And I was thinking, what? I always helped him as a corporate secretary by addressing him with the best possible information. And now he is telling the committee that they don't know the answer to the simple question. That was my call to action, because that was the point where I had to face the mirror and ask myself, what is the role I play in these core processes? Am I actually a moral conscious? And the answer is actually no. I had to be aware more and more that being a conscious of the board or being a conscious of your company, a moral conscious, I had to think that I had to give my board of directors more perspectives on the topics which were lying on the table, where they had to make a decision. I see and saw at that point that my role as a corporate secretary or a governance professional, next to being a board innovator, next to being a board assistant, is I'm a perspective giver. I'm actually a kind of a board producer. If you use the metaphor of creating and producing a movie, I'm a kind of a film producer. In Netflix, in Hollywood, we call it a showrunner of the board. I have to be the one who has to create all the necessary perspectives for the board so they can make the right and good decision and being transparent about it. And perspectives, that's interesting because here you see a picture, and it's a picture it's printed in the local paper in Holland 3 years ago. And the simple question in the paper was, here you can see a picture and tell me what do you see in a picture, in this picture. And when I addressed this question during my training courses, now after 1 minute, people are saying, well, it looks like an emotional picture to me. Yeah, I think something happened. Yeah, there's of course. And then I will tell them, okay, what you see in this picture is a Swiss family. The son of the Swiss family died. The heart of the son is given to this man, and they can hear the heart beating of the son, which is being died. So it's an emotional picture. This is what you see just by giving you one perspective, and this perspective is one photo. But the next question would be, is this what the photographer wanted us to see in this picture? When I ask that question, then normally it's become a bit silent in the audience because, yeah, no, I only can see emotion. And then I add just one sentence and opening up a new perspective. And that's the word South Africa. And then people, oh yeah, it's about apartheid. Yes, he wanted us to show us with this picture that it's nowadays possible also in South Africa that a wealthy white family donates a heart of the son to a black man. And that is what perspective givers do. They search and find out what are the necessary perspectives, in this case for us, for our board meetings. They have to make and take the decisions. And perspectives can be given by written content, by photos, by video, by experiences. Yes. And that is actually my new role. I played a new role, and here you can see, maybe you know the story. It's also written down in a couple of books. You see a plane from the Second World War. The plane flew back to England, and it has been shot by the Germans, all the red dots. And the Germans, the English people, wanted to make some decisions about how can we protect our airplanes better. And the focus on this research was on the red dots. They wanted to protect the red dots, so hopefully the planes were being protected better and the people came home safely. So that is perspective only on the red dots. But what they forgot was that most of the planes didn't came back, but were still in Germany on the ground. And it appears that not only you have to be secure on the red dots, but only up front. So it's always this question, what do I see? What do I get? That gives me the perspectives. But are there also some other perspectives which we didn't see? Yeah, then we have to create these perspectives. And that is, I think, one of the most interesting roles of the governance professional in our new era, because there's so much going on around our globe, so much perspectives we can create and add to our boardroom table. Well, I told you I wrote a book. It's called The Philosopher's Stone. I had a wonderful meeting with a Dutch marketeer. She's called Carlijn Posma, and she told me I wrote a book. It's called Binge Marketing. And I said, oh, if you want to stay ahead of the curve, always be aware of the marketeers. So I told her, please tell me, what did you find out? And Carlijn Posma told me, yeah, I wanted to be a successful marketeer. And so difficult because we're overloaded with information and with attention. How can I be successful? And she said, I did a research on Hollywood, on Netflix, because I'm so interested. Why does Netflix succeed in getting me attached to their content, to their series? And she researched these principles of Hollywood and adapted them into marketing principles. When I read her book, I thought, what? For 80%, her marketing principles are the same as my book, as my management novel. What about combining those two things? And then I can see what is the new role of the governance professional next to the traditional role. So again, I adapted some marketing principles into governance. And it's called binge governance. The last part of my career as corporate secretary at my company, I started to use binge governance into practice. And what is binge governance? Well, here you can see it. When you try to see and think and act in perspectives for your boardroom, then bring all your boardroom information or your marketing, we can say content, like a rock solid television series. And every meeting, intact image and sound, is an episode of the same series. This was the metaphor which I used by creating the best possible boardroom meetings, which results in magical moments. And here you can see some sport series in Holland at the time. You can see there was a famous series every day on the television, and it was called The World is Turning. And it is somewhere in the year 2016 that everybody in Holland, evening time, was watching this series. And we were sitting at our desk at our company, and we were saying, well, we have to do a couple of boardroom meetings. What about using this concept, the world is turning, and try to see what we can use in our boardroom meetings? And it worked. And here you can see it. We created a boardroom meeting format. So suppose we had to do 8 boardroom meetings in a year, and the format was always like this. And we used the concept of the world is turning. So, and the world is turning uses actually, it's a discussion program format, and there's an independent host, Matthijs van Nieuwkerk, and he is arranging this discussion. Here you can see him on the left and the back with the black tie, and he does it very properly. He's always efficient, on time, and when there's a discussion, it's going on, then suddenly some music is started playing, and that's the sign, okay, we have to stop the discussion, we have to go to another topic. And we were thinking, also in our boardroom meetings, they were discussing a lot, and we were saying, well, let's make a concept where we can introduce music. So on the left photo, you can see we used a DJ, and this DJ was on the side, and there was discussions going on. You see it on the left, on the right photo, a discussion on a table. And if the discussion lasted too long, then the DJ started to play, and then the independent host, in this case a director with the white shirt, got the sign, okay, I have to stop. He also uses the microphone to direct the conversation. You can see the chair again with the CFO on the table, an independent director, the CFO, and an advisor, and also one empty chair. There's always one empty chair at the table. Why? Because we had some core values in our company, and one of them is your own responsibility. That was one of our core values. And in this case, the board of directors is sitting on the table, but around the table, there are all standing managers and directors attending this boardroom meeting. But regardless your authority, regardless your formal position, if you want to address some point in this topic on the table, then you get the opportunity to take the yellow chair, sit in it, do a part of the discussion, and afterwards you go back. So we actually see we had a concept, we adapted our core values, and we tried to make out a concept of a boardroom meeting. And it worked very well. But it also gave some new challenges, because you can create and think of this marvelous boardroom meetings, but upfront, you have to think about a couple of things. One, what actually does your audience or directors like to read, watch, and listen to before they attend a boardroom meeting? What is actually your content strategy? Who are your key players in the boardroom? Who is telling the story? What's your plot summary? And what's your decor? And these are all kind of questions which also are being addressed by marketeers and also by film producers, but only we adapted them in a governance context. So we're running a bit out of time, so we're going a bit faster. This is what we did. We were asking ourselves upfront, these boardroom meetings, what makes our directors happy? And we started by writing it down in personas. Now, personas are commonly used in marketing, but we write down personas for our own boardroom members because we wanted to know what are the motivations, what do they like, what do they dislike, what are their goals. And just by drinking a cup of coffee, having a small interview, gave us the perspective of our customers. These are the people who wanted to be affected, and actually we wanted to affect them with the boardroom information. Addicted, that's the good word, sorry. So we started by writing down personas. The second one was thinking, what's actually our governance content strategy? And it seems an odd question, but in my case, when I had to prepare the boardroom meetings, and during the boardroom meetings, I think still today, 80 to 85% of the boardroom information, so the perspective which you're going to give, is written content, papers, notes. It was before, during, and the notes itself were also papers. So actually, as a marketeer, you would say you have a single channel strategy. So whether people, your board of directors, like or dislike paperwork, it's a single strategy. You only provide them with boardroom papers. Yeah, and we changed it. In our new concept, we try to see whether we can use a multiple channel strategy. So not only paperwork, but also using, for example, videos. And video is king everywhere around the boardroom. So why not use video in a strategic way to add and create value, or opening up perspectives in the boardroom meeting or before the boardroom meeting? It doesn't always have to be in the boardroom meeting, because here you can see you maybe can address a 1-minute video up front next to the agenda and ask the same people to attend to the boardroom meeting and give a live presentation. Now, and then you have a multiple channel strategy. Think about which strategy, content strategy, do you need to create this kind of boardroom meetings, to create all the necessary perspectives which the board needs to take the right decisions. We had some focus points to do. First one, I told you, personalization. In marketing, it's traditional. They know you already. When you search on Google, the next morning you get all these pushes on internet or on email, but personalization is key. Try to see, what do your directors need? The other one, framing will be the standard. In this case, framing your boardroom information. A simple one. I always write the notes, but I always write them in black, printed out in black. Until one of my secretary told me, what you should do, Edo, is when there is a decision being made by the board, please mark it green. When there is a green light, it's decision being made. When there's an action point, please mark it red. Just by using and introducing colors into a note, it worked. It's a kind of illusion. So framing your information will be standard. And the third one I told you already, I think, but it's my personal vision, video will also be more and more and common used into our boardroom. Everywhere else outside our big world, video is king, but it can be used to create proper perspectives. One to say, who has thought leadership? Interesting question, because in my boardroom, if there were difficult decisions which has to be taken, actually always the man on the right picture, the one with the purple tie, was the CEO. Well, I'm going to tell my non-executive directors what to do. And everybody was kind of, yeah, I'm going to tell, now it's my. So normally he was the one who stood up. He had the thought leadership, also in a formal way. But our mission and our core values of our company, we do it together. We are one team. So we were thinking, yeah, what to do about one team. Of course, the board has to take this decision. And what we did is we were thinking our managers who were standing in the room on the right photo are sitting on the left. They always were doing the hard work. Always, week in, week out. And we were saying, well, they should be the thought leadership for the board of directors. And here you can see also an example. We try to make and create videos for our boardroom meetings. Videos where they told the board about a certain topic, where they had to deal with, what the challenges were they had to face, all those kind of 1-minute videos. And by using them again and again and again, also for the boardroom meetings, it became aware that the thought leadership was not about the CEO, it was about the management. It was one choice we make. And as I told you before, what we really did was trying to see whether we could adapt our core values, our mission, our core values of openness and reliability into the daily practice of the governance. And in this case, I told you the chair was an example of that. Everybody, if they would like, they could sit in the chair, be part of the discussions, and otherwise stand up and go and sit back. That's because own responsibility was one of our core values. And then you will see it worked. Now, by doing and answering these upfront questions, I think you became more and more, or I became more and more like a showrunner. It was a kind of a writing room. We were sitting down. What's the personas? What are the decisions which has to be taken? What are the things we can use to create not only experiences, but only memory to the experiences? And here you can see an overview. There's the first one we thought of was, what is our plot summary? What are our core values? What is our mission statement? Because regardless they are going to discuss, regardless they are going to decide, it also has to be seen from a focal point of the company's mission, the company's vision, or our core values. And when you have that in mind, and then you try to see whether you can create content, information, of course you're going to do it. And of course, I think dominantly it will be on paper, but try to see whether you can add something in the setting, the boardroom itself, in using senses or a combination of those two. Try to see if you can use a kind of storytelling, not only addressing the point, but make a story out of it with thought leadership. And you will see that stories will last longer than only boring board information. And a kind of gamification. And gamification is, for example, as I told you, we started, for example, by setting the non-executive directors on a bicycle or a 1-minute meditation. It's all kind of gamification which you can use not only for fun, but trying to opening up all the necessary perspectives which the board needs upfront, during, or after a boardroom meeting. And by doing so, I became with the term binge governance, trying to produce a series of these boardroom meetings like a showrunner of the board or a board producer. A very new role. It lasted, in my opinion, to more effective and efficient decision making. I think so. I was totally in control. But by doing so, I was the guy behind the scenes, the producer. There were the actors, I was the producer, but I had control because I was the master who was providing them with the necessary information and all the perspectives. So it helped me a lot by being in control, and it helped me to create more impact, strategic impact, and more visibility for the boardroom. So that were, in my opinion, the positive results. On the other hand, I had to be aware they had to train some new skills, not a traditional one, because it's the new role next to the traditional role. But it opened up in my mind, they had to train my skills on what we call today actually the 21st century skills like communication, of course, collaboration, it's all about collaboration, but the last two, critical thinking, because I was the one finally who had to give the answer, who are trying to receive these perspectives, what are the perspectives, in what content do we provide the perspectives, written or whatever, a video. So it has to be critical thinking, because it was not about me, it was about me as being the moral conscience of my company. The last one, I had to be a bit more creative. In my opinion, we're all creative. You can use some help because everything is already found out, but please be open-minded, try to see it, find it, and adapt it. So the last two things, critical thinking and creativity, are, in my opinion, skills which has to be addressed for the governance professional to be successful in this role. Takeaways. Finally, yeah, in 1 minute, please. Hopefully I have given you some inspiration. It's a snapshot of all things of my vision. There are also training courses to be followed, but if you want to try to start with creating personas of your boardroom, of your board of directors, because then you can adapt to this board of directors. Try to see if you use a multiple channel strategy or only one way. Try to see, does it fit the needs of the directors? Now, three. Now try to use some creativity. If you're not creative yourself, try to go outside and you will be influenced. Yeah, and produce the boardroom meeting in accordance with your plot summary. Don't do it because you like it. No, you're a moral conscious. Try to see what's the plot summary, what are the core values, what is our mission or our vision of a company, and try to see if you can create all the necessary information for your boardroom members, and try to use this third role of the company, secretary. Thank you for listening to me. Hopefully you enjoyed.
Maybe... Absolutely. So many comments, so many questions, and I know that we have run out of time. We've got 2 minutes. But
sorry.
If I can just no, that's fine. Everybody, the one comment was they're glued to the presentation. So thank you so much for that. And just to confirm, will you be sending this through to me so I can load it to the web page?
Of course.
Great.
Yes.
Excellent. So the one question is from Alan Carter. He said, I like the soapbox idea, but not sure how transferable it is across cultures. Do you have an issue with the board? And I'm talking maybe not national cultures, but boardroom cultures.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, and the time is too short to explain it. But I know I was a corporate secretary for over 15 years, so I was a mature corporate secretary, and I was trusted by my CEO. So he gave me, do it, Edo. So that helped me a lot by doing this kind of experiments or magical moments. But in general, I think, regardless the culture, I think start by adding minor adjustments to the things you're doing, very minor, and try to see if it works well. If it doesn't work, for example, these cookies or this apple pie, for example, when it works, you will get a positive return of your board of directors or the boardroom meeting. If it doesn't work, stop. Just stop and do something else. Not the big ones. Maybe I told you a bit about the big ones, about light and music. No, slowly try to see. And I think you will find something. Not, yeah.
Thank you, Edo de Vette. If anyone wants to connect with Edo, you can connect on LinkedIn. I've just posted the chat on LinkedIn. Follow Edo on LinkedIn. We also have his profile on the web page, and the recording has been loaded to the web page. Thank you so much for your time. We really are most appreciative.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.